Georgia. Welcome back to Make Life Happen. This is part 2 of the identity series. In the first video, we talked about identity and how you describe yourself. I asked questions like, what about your life or who you are describes your entire identity? How do you define yourself? I also went on to talking about how God defines us, using scriptures such as you were created fearfully and wonderfully in His image. I described the fact that neither our past, your career, your desires, your achievements, lack thereof, the way you look, none of these things actually define who you are or your actual identity as God sees you. In this video, we're going to talk more about calling and purpose. So each individual was created uniquely and differently. And although we don't use what we do in life or what we have in life or the way we look or any of that to define who we are in God's eyes and our identity, there is still all of these things that come together to give us the purpose in life. So the first couple of years as a Christian for me was also the first couple of years after my son was born. I got baptized when he was just over a year old. I spent a lot of my energy trying to find out what my calling or purpose in life was. There's a lot of things that I had done growing up that I no longer did. There was a lot of things that I had achieved in my teens that were suddenly not appropriate or not aligned with my life at that time, or I had to give it up because of circumstances and whatnot. So I spent a lot of energy and prayer and thought life into trying to figure out what my purpose was, what God had called me to do and whatnot. Now, identity does have something to do with that, in a sense that who you are as a person, your interests, your desires, your skills, your talents, your experiences are supposed to somehow lead you to a purpose or a calling over your life. So as a single mom searching for my purpose during my son's toddler years, early years, there were 3 very important things that I learned. 1, God's revealed will over my life and over everybody's life, basically. The verse says in 1 Peter 1:16, because it is written, be holy as I am holy. So the word holy basically means separate from. God calls us to be separate from the world. There are some things that He makes very visible to us as His revealed will. One of that is separate yourself. Basically, not because He wants you to be lonely or isolated or alone, or for the world to think that you're this weird Christian freak who, doesn't do anything fun or whatnot, but because there are some habits that will attach itself to you that you need to let go of when you're in the presence of God, when you're trying to build a relationship with God. This is the first part of your calling, to be holy as He is holy, or at least pursue and seek holiness. Pursue and seek closeness with God so that you can hear from God and have that intimate relationship with God, so that all of the things from your past can be cleansed, healed, some restored, and also other scriptures such as, the 10 commandments, like do the right thing, right? Don't steal, don't lie, don't covet, don't be jealous, don't murder, don't do things that are evil in God's eyes. And generally 90% of what's in there is actually evil in the world's eyes too. Like you shouldn't be stealing or killing or doing all of those things. But God also calls you to separate yourself from all the things that are leading you away from Him. Be holy as you are holy. This is the part that is revealed to everyone in the Word about God's will over your life. Each individual has a different calling over their lives, your talents, your experiences, your achievements, your career choice, career path, where you're placed, will all have something to do with what you're going to bring regarding the kingdom of God and according to the purpose of God over your life. But being holy is the first step, to separate yourself from the world and not to be conformed with it. Now, this will be easier said than done. If you were like me, if you grew up in a very secular lifestyle and secular family, and then you're now suddenly at 19 a Christian, you're now trying to do what you know is right by God's eyes, but you also have your foot halfway in the world, or a whole bunch of friends who are not Christians and they're still doing all the things that you're trying to let go of, or you still kind of enjoy at that time. To be honest, in my early 20s, I still enjoyed clubbing. I still enjoyed drinking alcohol, and I still enjoyed parties that weren't exactly with my Christian friends. I have done things that were blatantly not recommended according to the Word of God, but it takes time to get through these things. However, God calls you to separate yourself from all of this. Not immediately, it won't happen immediately, it's a progress, but eventually, at least until you are able to withstand all of the things that are around you and not conform to it, you have to separate yourself from it. He doesn't say it so that you become this, person who's hateful towards people who are doing things that you used to do. But he says it so that you develop character in yourself that is strong enough that when you do go back into a situation like that, you're able to withstand what is unholy in God's eyes. The second thing that I learned as a single parent, and this is going to pertain only to single parents, single moms and single dads, listen up. Your child is your first ministry. Raising this child is going to be the most important thing that you do when it comes to your calling over your life and purpose in your life. No matter how you feel about it, this is the truth, because ultimately you need to bring up a child who believes in themselves, is confident, is God-fearing, and heaven-bound. It's not easy. As a single parent, there are absolutely going to be so many sacrifices to be made, and you're going to have to be able to handle that with grace. It's not always going to be pleasant, the amount of things you would have to sacrifice in your life that you enjoyed doing before or having before, but you have to do it with grace, and you have to be able to sacrifice these things without coming down on the child or letting it reflect in bitterness or discomfort or disappointment. Of course, everybody's single parenting situation is different. Some of you are blessed, and when I say blessed, you really are blessed to have family members around you, possibly grandparents or uncles and aunts for the child, to watch the child when you need to do something or get something done. You may have child support from the parent, the other parent. You may actually be co-parenting or sharing custody, whatnot. But if you're having any of these things where you're financially supported by the other parent or have people in your life helping you out, be very grateful for it, and don't ever forget to thank them and the Lord for these things. It's not always the case for everybody. Now, others, you may have gone through a bad divorce or even an amicable divorce. You may have had a child out of wedlock and don't have your parents' support, or don't get any. In my case, you didn't get any child support or any support whatsoever from the other parent. These are things that you're going to have to remember are going to affect you financially, emotionally, probably, but you have to learn to cope with these things. You have to learn to manage your emotions. You're going to have to learn to manage your finances so that you know that your child is not neglected. You have to make sure they're fed. Of course, the simple things like clothes on their back, food on their plate, roof over their head. These are the simple things. Now, going beyond that, you're going to have to provide for things such as, extracurricular activities or gifts they want randomly, little things that make them happy. You're going to have to figure out a way to make things work. Some of the sacrifices are going to include financial, social life, possibly your career or education, and anything else you can think of, really. I had to cut down on a lot of things that I enjoyed as a teenager, to make sure that we were sufficiently provided for, that we were able to pay, that I was able to pay all the bills and still be able to take care of all of my son's needs. In the first few years, I had to sacrifice the type of job and the career that I wanted to be in order to take a job that was within the time periods of the daycare provider. The daycare opened at 7 and closed at 6, and I had to make sure that I'm able to get to work between those hours, finish before the daycare closes, and come pick up my son. My social life, I wasn't always available to go out with my friends because, you know, they had a more free schedule, and I needed to make sure I had either a babysitter or that I had enough money to pay a babysitter to be able to go out with my friends and spend time. All of this will happen. It's going to happen, and it might stress you out sometimes, but you have to be emotionally prepared for it. I had to take a lot longer to do the college program that I was doing because I had to do it part-time, in order to make sure that we were, you know, financially okay. I was working in the daytime, and I was taking at one point just one course per semester. There was even a year where I took one course the whole year in the evening because that's the only time I could find a babysitter for my son. There will be sacrifices to be made. If you have a shoe fetish like I did, you're gonna have to cut down on buying shoes. But it's not forever, because they do grow up, and the time that you do spend in the things that matter, like your education and your career, even if it's a little bit at a time, will pay off. And the sacrifices that you do make at the beginning, especially at the very beginning, to make sure that they have that bonding with you and that security in you, will pay off as they grow up, because they'll, in their teens and their preteens, they'll be able to communicate with you better if you're always there, as opposed to just, you know, working, or being completely out of the picture and they're always with a babysitter. So it's always beneficial for you to spend that extra time with them whenever you can, and to make the sacrifices necessary. Whether we like it or not, this is your first calling, because you have a child now. Contrary to popular belief out here in North America, it is not the village that raises the child. And as much as we want to think that we have that kind of support, as a Christian, 90% of the time, we don't want the village raising our child. I don't want my child to be raised by anybody in my neighborhood or anybody that was in my old neighborhood. I don't want to come home to find him with the next door neighbor who is constantly smoking, or, you know what I mean? There's so much that is so different from your views that you have to make sure that you take full responsibility for your child. This is the most vital, most detrimental part of raising your child. So no, the village is not responsible for your child. You had the child, it is your responsibility. It's going to be hard. It's going to suck so much at so many nights. You're probably going to feel either lonely or stressed or tired, but it's your responsibility, and it's worth it. Ultimately, it's worth it. And when that day comes, when you realize all of that is coming together, when you see the child's face, you'll know it's worth it. But the amount of time you spend on your child will never be regretted. Third thing I learned was contentment. I read this amazing book when my son was young, very young, while I was trying to find my purpose and calling in life, by Joyce Meyer. And no, it's not Battlefield of the Mind. I read that one too. That was a great book too. But it was called Women to Women. In that book, she talks in one of the first few chapters about contentment. Now, I did say in the second part of this video that you're going to have to sacrifice so much. But I also want you to know that it's not forever. And it doesn't mean that your individual calling over your life that doesn't involve, your son or your daughter is not it's not real anymore. It's still real. Your desires are still real. If you want to, eventually get a job that's different from what you're doing currently, or go on a different career path that involves more education or more, higher education and whatnot, I'm not trying to say that you no longer have the right to that. You do. You still have the right to all of the things that make you an entirely individual person, aside from being a single parent or a parent at all. Now, the key to getting there gracefully and happily, full of joy and with peace, is contentment. Contentment doesn't mean complacency. It's entirely the opposite. It's just knowing that you're okay with where you are while you're working towards getting to where you're going. So for me, these videos were on my mind about 8 years ago. I was talking to one of my close friends at the time about it. I thought about it. I wrote a whole bunch of things about it. I journaled about it. I, even wrote topics for quite some time. I asked other people to do the videos with me. I've moved, I've changed jobs, lots of things have happened in between, all the while still raising my son full time. And then finally last year, I got a couple of people to agree to do the videos with me, but our schedules were conflicting. Suddenly one day God said, just go do it. I wasn't ready. I didn't have the equipment. I didn't have the time. I didn't know where to start. But I just took out the things that I was working on during that time, in my quiet time, while I was, having devotions and worship time with the Lord. I would write things down, and all of these things that were in my journals now started to become topics for these videos. I'm not saying that this is my ultimate purpose in life, but this is something that was placed in my heart years and years ago that I knew was part of the purpose in my life. So it doesn't mean that because you're sacrificing the first 4 or 5 years of raising a child from the things you want to do in life that you're never going to get to do what you want to do. It just means that it may be at a different time than you expected it to be. God's timing over your life is always perfect. Keep in mind, He's going to change your personality. He's going to change your character. He's going to build you up. He's going to, situations in your life are going to break you down and then bring you back up. You're going to develop vigilance, resilience. You're going to develop emotional intelligence over these years. You're going to go through a lot that's going to change you as a person before you get to the place that you want. You don't want to do something before you are ready to do it, because that can crumble and tumble and turn into a disaster. So, and of course, we're always never entirely ready for something, but if your character is not ready to handle the pressures of a certain desire and dream that you're looking to fulfill in your life, that dream won't last. So you want to be ready at the time, but be content while you're going on the journey to pursue it. Be content with sacrificing things for your child so that they can have a good life and a good future. Be content with spending less on yourself and spending less time in social circumstances as opposed to spending that time with your child. Be content with doing the job that's paying the bills at that time while you're working towards getting the job that's going to, do more than just pay the bills and be a blessing and help you to become a blessing. Be content, but don't be stagnant. Be content, but don't be complacent. Don't settle in that place. Work towards it quietly while you're still doing what's necessary during that time. So to sum it all up, the 3 things that I learned, which I think will help you out too if you know these things, are be holy as He is holy. Separate yourself from the things that lead you away from God. Follow the revealed will of God and the commandments of God. Remember that your child is your first ministry. The very first thing, the most important thing for you to do in that time of your life is to raise your son or daughter. And contentment. Be content with what you have and where you are while you are pursuing what it is that you desire and where you want to be. I hope you liked this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope this was beneficial for you and helpful. If you liked it, please like, subscribe, and share, comment. And if you'd like to know when I'm posting anything, please click post notifications so that you know exactly when another video is up and ready.